Hello and welcome to Events, Dear Boy, a new podcast for anyone involved in business events. If you're a conference producer, corporate event organiser, or events agency, then we're here for you. We want to share the highs and the lows, the best practices, as well as the horror stories. You can expect ideas and inspiration, and maybe some laughs too.
And if you're a speaker at these events, then we're also here for you. We'll be talking about how you do it, what makes speakers nervous, and how it feels when it all goes brilliantly or terribly.
My name is Catherine McNamara, and I'm the marketing lead at the talent agency Pomona Partners, and someone who has organised many business events in my working life. Alongside me is Pomona Partners founder and veteran of 1,000 speaking gigs, Tom Cheesewright.
Each episode will be going to be... Excuse me, I'm choking on a piece of toast. Each episode, we're going to be joined by a guest from the business event space, either an organiser or a speaker. We'll ask them to share their experiences, both good and bad, and their tips for people in their positions.
And this week, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Jamie Klingler. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, if we could dive straight in, could you talk to us about your area of expertise?
Well, I used to run an events company, but it was mostly food festivals and marketing, experiential marketing events. So I invented National Burger Day, and I came up with the London Seafood Festival, which was held at Battersea Power Station for 40,000 people when they were developing Battersea Power Station before there was a tube station, and now they've got all the footfall they need. So my background was very much magazines and events and big activations. And then when tragically Sarah Everard was killed, I tweeted that I was going to do a vigil for her because of my events background, because I was able to create a safe space for women to come and have a moment of silence. Well, I should have been able to create a safe space for women to have a moment of silence, except for the Metropolitan Police said we were not allowed. And they threatened to sue us and threatened to arrest us and charge us with £10,000 each under the prosecution under the Serious Crimes Act for a moment of silence for a woman that one of their own had killed, which turned into a huge court battle. We went to high court, and then we ended up pivoting and raising £600,000 for women's groups, and then kept fighting the Met Police and eventually won. And it was found that they illegally stopped our vigil. But in the process of all of that was kind of, the word's never used about someone that looks like me because I'm a white woman, but I was radicalized in terms of what's going on within our police forces. So I became a campaigner for police reform and women's safety.
Wow.
It's quite the story.
Like a tweet that changes your entire life, like you up in the eye of the storm completely by accident. Like, I know I get myself into some hijinks sometimes, but this was above and beyond.
So, wow. I mean, that is such a journey to all of a sudden become, like you say, in the eye of the storm. So, obviously, I mean, usually we would go on to say, well, how did you become a speaker? How did you? But obviously, it feels like one thing has obviously led to another. You've then found yourself on this platform. Can you talk about actually kind of embracing that platform and how that's kind of that journey that you've been on?
Well, I had done tons of PR stuff, and I had done it all behind the scenes, but I'd never been on camera. And there were 9 women that started reclaiming streets that week. And the girls in the group were all probably 15, 20 years younger than me, but they would do 1 or 2 interviews and be completely depleted, stressed out about how they were being perceived. And I grew up, like, I was raised Catholic and would read at Mass every week. I've always been happy to publicly speak and happily to organize things. So I'd never been on camera, but once I was on camera and I was sparring, one of the benefits of being not from England and being an American is I'm not held to the same rules. So I'm allowed to be punchier. I'm the right side of white, so I'm allowed to come out with some real body blows to the Met and not get the abuse that women of color would get. I also am not held to the class standards. So when I call something out, I'm really able to do it really succinctly and really feisty without it being seen as disrespectful as it would be if I was an English woman. So I dial up the Philly. We joke that I definitely lean into that aggressive stance because I'm allowed to, and if you're allowed to bend those rules, I think you can also use them to really, really change things occasionally. So like the weekend that the new commissioner, Mark Rowley, who's now been there like a year and a half, but the weekend before he started, they were like, what is the number one thing Mark Rowley has to do? And everyone thought I was the women's safety woman. So I was going to come in and talk about women's safety. And I was like, justice for Chris Kaba. For listeners, Chris Kaba is the man that was a young black man that was killed and was unarmed, who they're going through the trial now. But it's things like that I think all of a sudden, when you're given this platform and this audience, that you need to use it wisely and need to give respect to the people that are trusting you with their voices. One of the things in the work that I do with survivors and with victims is that so many of them can't come on media and do what I do and be the broadcaster because it's so traumatic every time they do it. Whereas I have not been in a domestic violence situation, so I can funnel their anger and I can funnel their stories without the same fear and without the same traumatic incident. Like if somebody gives me 3 lines, I can go, and I did 45 interviews the first weekend. Like I can just go back to back live, and I'm much happier to do live than recorded because then I don't ever have to see it again or hear it again.
How is that relationship with the media and that profile translated into your speaking work and your work with other audiences? Because clearly you've got that incredible business history and successful track record, but now this present activism as well. How do those two cross over, and what sort of audiences does it speak to?
Well, that's the thing. Because I am every woman, I speak very well to middle England women, because the reason I stood up and counted was I was angry and I was done with it. It's not for political gain. It's not for I've been asked to run. I'd be the world's worst candidate. I hate being told what to do. I hate being told what to say. Like I would be, and I'm bad at compromise, and I know that. So because I'm not trying to get anywhere, I'm able to encapsulate the rage and the experience and how every day the cost of being a woman and the comments and that we adjust our behavior all the time. So I'm able to really talk about it. I joke with my best friend's mom that it's mock trial. Like back in the day, I wanted to be CJ from The West Wing, and I really am. Like that part of my life has really come into fruition. We are also media darlings, like I get invited on 2 to 3 times a week, and it's been 3 years. So I do Sky News once every 2 weeks. I did LBC yesterday morning. And because I really have gotten very, very good at the snapshots and making every question seem like the last question you're going to get and making sure there's tons of sound bites. And the other thing is during the first lockdown, I quit drinking. So I'm kind of the producer's easiest subtopic because I'm available at 5 a.m. I'm available at 10 p.m. I'm always sober. So it just makes it that I'm not ever cursing too much. My sister sees me that I talk more proper, and because I don't curse as much and I'm a little bit slower. I'm still machine gun, but...
You've just reminded me of a phone call I got at about 5:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, and it had been a particularly rough day, and I confess I'd opened the wine quite early, and I was probably a couple of glasses in when the BBC asked me to go on air, and perhaps influenced by having had a couple of glasses of wine, I said yes, which wasn't the best idea.
and like the night that they got rid of Cressida Dick, which was about a year too late, I was actually on a date with my dog and a guy at a Phoenix Arts Club, and they called and said, can you be here in 15 minutes? And so my best friend came to get the dog. I got to the BBC, and City Hall was having a leaving do. So everybody they normally would have had on was drinking. And so I got 18 minutes of very, very nicely taking down Cressida Dick on the BBC Live right after they announced it.
Talk to me about the types of events that you do when you go and speak. What sort of audiences are interested in that, in the profile that you have now, that combination of business success and an activist? Because there's a particular tenor to that type of speaking, isn't there? There's a particular, people are looking for a particular thing from you. So
what I kind of formed it into, because people really do not want to talk about actual dead women and violence after dinner. It's not a nice topic. It's painful for all of us. Whereas what I've translated it into is being an accidental activist. So the reason I stood up and said I would do a vigil was because I ran an events company. It wasn't just out of the blue. And so there's so many of us that really want to do good and give back to our communities, but it's kind of teach a man to fish. If you're an expert in SEO, don't go and clean a beach. Teach local charities how to do SEO well. Use your skills that you've adapted and honed over your entire career and give it back to someone who can really use it, because then you've got individual impact And the charity matters. If you have 3 hours of my time and you put me on a beach to clean up, I'll never think about the beach again. Like, it's a total waste of time. If you get me to activate my entire network to get volunteers out, then it works. So play to your strengths, play to your skills. I've spoken at a synagogue's 1,000 Day of Happiness. I've spoken at some schools. I've done a few dinners, but the accidental activist part rather than really talking about police violence. I've done the Cambridge Union debate, which was terrifying and then wonderful, debating in the rounds and points of order. And again, as an American, those hallowed halls, the last person that had been there that was American was Nancy Pelosi. And I was like, oh my God. Wow. little bit of big shoes to fill.
So you talk really passionately about kind of activation and, that kind of sparking point to want to help in terms of arrange that vigil. And that comes through really, really strongly. What is it that you love about being able to speak, have that platform? What is it that really, really gets you moving?
I love audiences and I love the audience feedback, and especially with my own personal journey with quitting drinking, and I lost a lot of weight. Those emails that you get from people about their own struggle, like yesterday was 4 years since I stopped drinking. And I never thought that was possible. And if you touch one person that's like, oh my God, I can try this, that kind of back and forth, like having people line up after a speech and cry and tell you how much it meant to them. We've gotten so siloed off that we don't necessarily think one person can make that much of a difference. And literally I cannonballed into this by accident. And we raised 600,000 pounds and gave it to women. And we were trusted to give that money. The BBC 2 weeks ago did a whole story on where that money went. And for me to be able to watch that, and like, we gave women beds to get out of really dangerous situations. So the worst situation in the world, and forever my heart will go out to the Everards and all families of women killed by men, or killed by anybody, but women primarily that are killed by men. It is important, and it can change, and it has to change. It's hard when I don't have the same influence as God, I'm blanking, Peterson or any of these people that are going off on it. But the other side is when I speak to students and when I do university lectures. Leeds, Beckett University had me once at the very, very beginning, and then they did a whole campaign on girls' effect on the nighttime economy. And now I go back every year, and it's their event students, and it's how they deal with safety issues for women. It's the responsibility. It's how you deal with drunken women or drugs. And when you're actually talking to people face to face, the energy you get off that crowd of being an extrovert and feeling that vibe back is incredible.
What about terrible experiences? Have you had any terrible experiences as a speaker?
I have one that's hilarious.
Please share.
And it was the second anniversary of Biba and Nicole, who were two sisters that were murdered. And there was a march down to outside of Scotland Yard, and there was a stage, and Dr. Shola, who's an amazing speaker and educator, was introducing, and there was a sign language interpreter on the stage. And we were lined up in the order we were supposed to go. But Dr. Shola couldn't see me, and she starts introducing me. I come past the sign language interpreter, and she introduces me as you'll all know her from the Game of Thrones. And it was a woman that is a young woman who's an actress on the Game of Thrones, got the wrong spot in line. And so like, I was like, oh, okay, I'll let Natalie come up here. I certainly was not a dragon on the Game of Thrones. So, and in that situation, like, you're really talking about the most serious thing, and you're outside of Scotland Yard talking about racism and the police. And it was really, really funny. And I had to go back past the sign language and like say I was sorry. And then I came on next, and everyone laughed that I wasn't Game of Thrones.
You do need a bit of levity in those moments sometimes.
The other one was in terms of broadcast. Last week, my dress split at 5 a.m. and we were pinning it while I was sat next to Sebastian Vettel from the F1 and makeup. And then I get on air, and I had quite a tight topped dress on, and my mic hadn't been turned on. So the tech guy is unzipping my dress on live TV, putting my mic on, zipping it back up, but the shoulder thing to hang your dress came out. So then I've got Kay Burley behind me, taking that out and putting it back under my armpit. So yeah, it was not the best day of reading the news.
Oh my goodness. So, well, other than wardrobe malfunctions, what tips do you give to speakers? What advice would you impart? Because it seems like you're very, obviously it feels like you're natural at it. There's kind of a flow to it. But
Well,
what advice do you give others?
I'm really comfortable speaking, but I'm not comfortable memorizing. So for me, when I had to memorize my TEDx, that was very difficult. And I can't say exactly how to do it, but my coach would have me put my thumb with each of my fingers in a pulsating thing to slow down. And so you take the beat and you're taking your thumb with your ring finger, then your middle finger, then your other finger, and you're going through that quietly behind your back just to slow yourself down. And also let jokes or let moments go. Like, don't rush through a moment. If you want something to land, give it the time to land. So it's the whole say something, and if you know it's a beat, let them digest it before moving on to the next bit. And really be authentic. When I did the Cambridge Union speech, someone I had met had just gotten in my head, and I do not come from money, and I do not come from an Ivy League education, and I was really nervous of those hallowed halls. And I wrote a speech with the help of my barrister, Pippa Woodrow, and it was so expert. It was so grown up. And then we went to a vigil, and I read it to my best friend, and she was like, "I love you, and that's awful." She's like, "People do not care about stats. They remember how you make them feel, and there's no Jamie in that speech." And luckily, I have a Gina in my life who told me to tear it up. And I tore it up and started over again and got a standing ovation, and girls came up and cried. But again, I get booked and I am who I am. And if I try to tone that down, it's not authentic. It doesn't work. And I don't generally get a lot of imposter syndrome, but about going to Cambridge was like my Achilles heel, that I wasn't proper enough. And I'm never going to be proper enough. I'm never going to be English. So why not do the Philly thing and enjoy it? And then people believe it. That's when they get me. Like, if they want me and they hear me and they like me, that's the point. Not if I'm being somebody I'm not really, or if I'm trying to say something that someone's told me to say.
I think a lot of British people could probably benefit from that phrase, "be more Philly."
I did a podcast recently where they were like, I didn't realize it was a serious question. I thought we were still in like jovial. They're like, "Oh, a piece of advice that your dad gave you." And I was like, "Oh, don't make me go Philly on your ass." And then they were like, something really nice and proper. I was like, "Oh God." I said I was the worst anti-violence campaigner because I want to beat everyone up all the time.
Jamie, you've talked about working with a coach. Is that a coach around you speaking to help kind of with the accidental activist? Is that how's that worked out?
It was actually for the TEDx. They had a coach for you.
Right. Okay.
And
okay.
18 minutes without notes is a really, really hard, big hill. And I wing everything. And because of the levity of that speech, we didn't wing it, and I needed to memorize, which I really don't do well. And it's funny because the range of people she works with a lot of people that are terrified to speak. Whereas mine was, let's narrow it down, let's get the points, and let's memorize. And so each person, and again, play to your strengths. And so I got the speech down enough by listening to it on 2 times the speed and then half the speed and doing all the stuff that the TED book says. I got to the point where once I was actually on stage, I could ad lib and do the little bits and add the Jamie in. Whereas once it was solidly mine, I think I could probably still do the speech, and it's been like 2.5 years.
Brilliant.
You got 18 minutes. I only got 16 minutes for mine.
I just looked yesterday because somebody was asking about it, and it was 17:50, and then I was the final speaker, so they let my dog come out on the stage at the end. It looks like I won a pageant and they gave me a puppy. I would definitely enter that pageant, by the way.
It's one of the things I love about TEDx is how it's professionalized over the years, and how many of them do have that support and that coaching and that development, because it's for a lot of our speakers, their TEDx is one of their best pieces of collateral, and so you really, really want to nail that opportunity. But actually, it's the organisers have got sharper as well. They're much better at curating programming. I mean, Herb, who runs a lot of the TEDx's in the UK, has always been a sharp cookie. He's always been good, but even they've got progressively more, more professional over the years. What would be your, particularly, I guess, learnings from that, but what would be your tips for other event organisers? Like, for you as a speaker, what gets the best out of you that the organiser can do?
I think if you're doing a panel, introducing the panel in advance really helps, and knowing what the other people in the panel their expertise is, so that you're yielding the floor at the right time, and you've got the right level of what they're going to say or what their expertise is. Because sometimes if a question comes to you that you think's perfect, and then you say something that's actually somebody else's field, is not really ideal. So actually, even 15 minutes of the panel being together at the beginning. Technical equipment, when tech equipment doesn't work, it always throws everybody. It's always a bit of a nightmare, and getting your dress unzipped on national television. But really, it's and water. It's just having water there for people. I think the people that have been the most helpful, though, are the stage managers. Like right before you go on, I think that minute and a half before you go on is so crucial. 2 weeks ago, when the BBC was announcing where we donated all the money that we raised, that was a hugely emotional full circle moment for me. And 5 minutes while I was in the green room, Kate announced that she had cancer. And I had lost my mom of cancer. So you've got a young mother with children. And I'm sat there and everything is like roiled up and everything is getting to be a bit too much. And the stage manager backstage is like, why are you here? What are you doing for Rosa, which is the charity we raise money for? She was like, you've got this. You've got this. And actually, that kind of solidarity and support from the crews that are making these events happen is amazing. And that's and then when I got off stage and finished the interview, came out and she hugged me and it was great. And and then I could go home and cry about what cancer does to our families and our mothers. But that was not the time and that was not the assignment. And so compartmentalizing a lot of this stuff, letting your nerves go. And honestly, wear good underwear, wear good lipstick, and wear good perfume. Like armor. Anytime I have a really big event, get my hair and makeup done, it just makes me feel like I'm a professional in costume a little bit. And the woman that's in costume and ready to go, nothing is getting in her way.
That
Thomas, back to you to go for makeup. I'll send you my makeup artist.
I have my concealer in my blusher down here.
That feels like a great place to wrap it up. Oh, Jamie, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been really inspirational. And, thank you too for listening and watching. We hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave a review, like and subscribe. And most importantly, share the podcast with your colleagues, your peers, whether they're fellow speakers or event organisers. And we'll be back soon with another episode.
Thanks. Bye-bye.